Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. A couple days ago, I watched a movie that wasn't my kind of movie. It was a love story. I'm more of an action kind of guy. When I was growing up, Jean Claude Van Damme. He was one of my favorites. So I was, I'm an action movie kind of guy, and I was convinced to watch a Christopher Reeve movie called. It wasn't called Superman. I've seen those. Unfortunately, I saw the third and fourth Superman. I shouldn't have done those. Those were a huge mistake. A huge mistake. But the movie that I watched, starring Christopher Reeve, was called Somewhere in Time. Somewhere in Time. That's the name of the movie. And spoiler alert, I mean, this movie came out in 1980. So if you haven't seen it yet, you should have seen it. I should have seen it before just a couple days ago. Anyways, it's a great movie. It's a great movie, and it's a good movie when you find yourself trying to stop yourself from crying at the end of it. That's how good this movie was. That's how much this movie pulled me into it. And what I really like about movies like Somewhere in Time is I like the way that it leaves you afterwards. Like those movies that you watch the movie and then you feel something by the end, and then you're thinking to yourself, wait a second, I gotta watch this again. I gotta go back. I gotta see, okay, what did I miss? Oh, there was a clue right there all along. I should have known it. I wasn't paying attention that first time. And those yeah, Somewhere in Time, I recommend that movie. It's a great movie. Anyways, I won't go too far into detail, but it's a love story, and it's got an ending that will it'll it'll make you do the best that you can to hold back tears if you're not in the mood to cry. Because when I watched it, I'm not in the mood to cry. I don't want to cry, so I'm not gonna cry. So I willed it. I willed it to be so. But I'm sure in some other multiverse, I cried. I cried at the end of Somewhere in Time, because that's just how good that movie was. It's just how good the story was. And that movie is based off of a book. And you know this to be true, as in when you have movies based off of books, there are so many details that you just can't put in the movie. You just don't have enough time, or maybe it just won't look good in a movie. But anyways, the movie Somewhere in Time is based off of a book. So you had a writer, they sat down, they planned it out, and they developed these characters, named the characters, what's going to be the setting, what's going to be the drama, who's my antagonist, my protagonist, all those different kinds of things. They're planned out specifically to really paint that picture, to draw you in, so that you have those feelings by the end of it. There was another movie called that I used to show when I taught U.S. history, and I taught this during World War II, during that World War II unit, and it was called Life is Beautiful. Now, Life is Beautiful, and I'm saying this as a principal. I like showing full movies in the class. I like showing full movies in the class because, sure, there are those times when, you know what, I need a break. And there were also those times where I felt like I really believe that it's important that the students experience, and that word is going to be important as we move along. I felt that it was important that the students experience this film. When you show a full movie in the class, you got to call it, it's a film. It's an educational film. But I felt that it was important. So Life is Beautiful. Here's another spoiler alert. You should have seen the movie. It came out in 97. But anyways, this one, I'll go into a little bit more details. This one is just really interesting. Really interesting. And the movie is controversial as well because it was a comedy. Like it was World War II, but it was a comedy, and it was told from the perspective of a Jewish man who was ultimately taken to a concentration camp along with his son. And in order to shield his son from the horrors of what was happening in the concentration camp, he told the son that it was a game. We're playing a fun game, son. Everything's okay. All is good. But he knew that it wasn't. And as you watch this movie, you realize that, this movie is about the love that a father has for his son, the sacrifice that the father is willing to make for his son. And you like that character. You love that character. You love that father. You loved him because he loved his son. And just, he didn't make it. He didn't make it out of the concentration camp. And I remember there was a scene where, well, first of all, the movie is kind of, you got to kind of push through. It's a little slow at the beginning. And plus they were, it's a little slow. And then you have the accent of the actor, but we pushed through that. I had to help my students push through it. But once they got to the part at the end, when they were just kind of wondering, okay, what's going to happen? This is a comedy. The father loves his son. And then they see that moment where the father, well, they don't see it. It's off screen, but you hear the gunshot. And like, as soon as that gunshot ran, from the movie echoed through the room, the students like, no, I love that guy. No, not him. Not him. You see, because there was a connection. There was a connection there. They felt something. They felt something there. When I taught world history, you guys are going to think that I did nothing but show movies in class, which is not the case. But I'm going to tell you about another movie that, this one I had to edit to make it appropriate. So I skipped scenes and whatnot. But the Joy Luck Club, that's another film that I showed to my students in segments. And, it just tells the story of a mother. And I'm really condensing this story, but it just tells a story of a mother who just goes through a lot during World War II, and just separated from her children for decades. And, in this movie, it talks about other women, during that time, because of the war, their struggles, and then ultimately, like I said, at the end of the movie, you have one of the mothers from that movie. She's reunited with her daughters, and I'll never forget that I had one student was just like, she was just crying, like she had to take a moment before she went to her next class, because she was just so emotional, because that story really connected to her. And she was able to really dig into the facts and information behind World War II because she saw it happen through the eyes of just real people. And so I say that to say, as we're on our journey, we're talking about how to respond to seemingly apathetic students. We're given some suggestions here. We're given some suggestions. Now, in the first episode of this series, the first thing I submitted that we need to do is we need to show students the purpose. What is the purpose of, from the student's perspective, what is the purpose of me getting out of bed, breakfast, clothes, just all those things, getting on the bus, rain, sleet, snow, coming to school, engaging in these lessons, doing the things teachers are asking me to do, while knowing that there are just so many other things that I'd rather do. There's so many distractions out there that I wouldn't mind yielding my attention to. So I talked about in that first episode, and I encourage you to go back and listen to that or watch that. You got to help them understand the purpose of school. What is the purpose of school? I believe very few things are universal in education, but I believe that is something that everyone needs to have an understanding of. They need to know what the purpose is, because the purpose is going to help them. It's going to help them move forward when things get tough, when there are distractions, when there are obstacles, when things don't work out, when that math problem, when it doesn't come easily, when you make these mistakes, you've done all this work, but you make this one mistake and it blows everything up. When you know the purpose, it helps students fight through that frustration and keep trying to problem solve. Today I want to talk about feelings. Let me read to you a little bit from this dissertation, and I'm gonna cite the author and link this in the description section so you'll have it as well. Listen to this. The author says, there is another dimension to the apathetic attitudes and lack of effort displayed by many students as a consequence of prescribed curricula. Okay. So it goes on to say, Lounsbury, 1991, states that underachievement is not the result of deficiencies in the head so much as it is the result of deficiencies in the heart. Deficiencies in the heart. What are we talking about here? Let's read on. The current curriculum is efficient in imparting facts, but it does not connect to one's basic humanity. Cohn from 1991 points out the pervasive lack of attention to caring and feeling for oneself and for others in the current school environment, with its emphasis on academics and the amount of knowledge acquired. Now, this is, he's citing research from 91, so it's a little bit older, but I still feel like it's compelling. Now, you can make the argument that we've come a long way in terms of humanity, acknowledging students, celebrating differences, affirming students. We've come a long way, but let's listen to this. Listen to this final point. Devoid of feeling, the required work gets done, or it may not get done, but its value eludes the inner nature and humanity of the child. That last part is interesting, but its value, the purpose, the why eludes the inner nature and humanity of the child. That's important. That's important right there. So I want to give you three things that this is telling me. Three things that can, perhaps I submit to you, can help you to better Help your students get connected with their feelings to the content, to your lesson, things that you can possibly do to touch their heart, to touch their heart and cause them to maybe give a second look, pay a little bit closer attention because of the way that made me feel. Because I tell you what, that movie Somewhere in Time touched me right here. Touched me right here. The last scene where the main character, he just dies of a broken heart because he can't be with the love of his life ever again because she's from a time way back in the past. Oh, but the last shot, the last thing that we see before they go to credits is just an image of heaven, and his beloved is just looking at the camera with their arms stretched out. And then as the camera pulls back, we see the main character. He comes to her, grabs her by the hand, and he doesn't kiss her. He just looks at her, and he's got this smile on his face because he's just so happy because he's found heaven and he's with the love of his life. And it just stops right there. Fade to credits. Wow. That's it right there. And I tell you, I wasn't interested. I really wasn't. Yeah, I don't want to watch a love story, but I mean, just like it touched me right here. So how can we get some of that in the classroom? That's the question. I mean, we're trying to respond to student apathy. We're doing what we can. We got to be creative here. So creative is a really good word because that's my number one. That's the number one tip that I have here. It's just be creative because, and that's easier said than done. I get that. But, sometimes, we want students to wonder, to contemplate, to really think about things, to inquire. We want that, right? That's what we want students to do. But sometimes we have to compel it because they're just not going to do it. And this is work that takes place up here in the minds of the student. Like we can't force it. That's a decision that the student makes. But we can, with a little creativity, we can create an experience in the classroom that causes them to, wow. I mean, you're hitting me right here. Like I'm familiar with that. Oh yeah, that my mom does that. Oh yeah, we have that tradition at our house. Oh yeah. That's a tradition in my culture. Oh, you're engaging me about the country that I'm coming from. Well, let me tell you about the country that that I come from. And that begins with, who are your students? And I know that you're already doing this work, but I think perhaps it takes a little bit more leaning into it. And it's always a good reminder because sometimes we can get caught in the pacing guide. I got to get this done, and there's just not enough time. And, perhaps your administration, they're not, administration is administration sometimes, and they're not making the best decisions, and you're having to fight through that as well. And I get it. But these are good things to keep in mind. Who are your students? What are their interests? And weave that into your lesson plan. And as always, you can research. You can do the research yourself. There's a lot of research out there. I'm sure there's a lot of research in your library. And you can check out blogs where they'll condense that information. Check out podcasts like this one where we'll condense that information for you as well. And then you can also borrow from your fellow teachers. Creativity, don't neglect creativity. And I think all of that starts with keeping your students in mind, who they are, what their interests are. I remember when I went to travel to Milwaukee, and we were looking at a couple schools how they implement personalized learning. And there was this one classroom. There was an English classroom, and the topic was Dungeons and Dragons. Now, obviously, that would be really nice. That would be really nice to do it on that level. But as I know, that takes a lot to get everyone on that same page. But I thought that was a great idea. All those students in the class who were interested in Dungeons and Dragons, for sure, it's not going to take a whole lot of energy to get them to read a book on Dungeons and Dragons because they love this stuff. But what can you do? What can you do to create that kind of experience in your classroom? Given all that you've got limitations that you're working with, but what can you do? You can do something. Secondly, I think originality. When we're responding to student apathy, it's going to take originality. Now, keep in mind, there's nothing new. There is nothing new out there. The information I'm sharing with you, you're probably saying, yeah, I've heard that before. But there are lessons and strategies out there that everyone is familiar with, but they haven't been taught by you. Like when you are executing that lesson, there's something different. Many of them have been taught, but they haven't been taught by you. There's something special about you. There's something unique about you. There's something that you can do with that can really make it special, really make it pop. That's why I never liked when my administration would give me, for our, I guess you can call it homeroom time. I never liked when they would just give us a binder and say, here, do this. I was just like, you just put me in a box and you're not giving me enough time to put me in this. Like, I'm not feeling this because I can't make it a original thing. I can't make it an original lesson. It's not me. I'm going to give you a quote. It is better to fail in originality than to succeed in imitation. Once again, it is better to fail in originality than to succeed in imitation. What I believe that you can do is you can take something that seemingly, everyone's doing this or this won't work. I want to challenge you to take that, find a way to put your spin on it and make it something special for your students. I think that you can do that. And I think that when you have that, when you approach things with that mindset, you can really come up with something special. You can you can improve upon something. And I think that you'll find that pretty refreshing, that you're able to take something, put your spin on it, and man, look at this. Look at what we have here. I think it'll give you some added energy because you were able to use your own creativity and craft something new from something old for your students. So originality. What can you do to really spice this up, keeping your students in mind and being your authentic self and putting your magic touch on that lesson? And the third thing I want to submit to you is it's a journey. It's a journey. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that coming into your classroom, there is something there that is waiting to be discovered. When I was a teacher, I had a sign on the outside of my classroom that said, enter seeking. And on the inside above the door, it said, leave with knowledge. Enter seeking, leave with knowledge. Going back to what I talked about in the previous episode, there's a purpose. There's got to be a reason. There's got to be a reason that you come to school. There's got to be a reason that you come to class. And for my students, I wanted them to enter seeking. You got to be looking for something. And if you're looking for something, that means you're investigating, you're inquiring, you're asking questions, you're doing all these things. And I believe that what that does is it changes the mindset and it compels one to think differently. And if I can compel them to hold that thinking, that different thinking, it's gonna change their actions. It's gonna change the way that they feel about being in the classroom. What? I'm in the class. I'm supposed to be seeking. I'm supposed to be seeking. Well, why am I supposed to be seeking? What's the purpose? Now, remember, before we get to that, I've given them the purpose, and I talked about the purpose in the previous episode. So please check that out. So today we talked about creativity, encouraging students to be creative. But in order to do that, we've got to understand who our students are. We've got to find that hook to bring out that creativity. And then we also talked about number two, we talked about originality, using some originality in your lesson planning. What's that special touch? What's that special thing that you have? What's something that you can add on to something that is old and make it new and make it unique because you are unique. And then number three, it's a journey. So convince your students that, hey, this is a journey. There's a reason you're coming here. You're looking for something. And what I believe is that as students experience that, they accept your language, that hey, this is a journey. They understand that, oh, I'm coming here to get something. I'm coming here to move closer to my goal each and every day. If I engage, if I investigate, I inquire, and all those things, and I do what's being asked of me in the classroom. So those are three things that we can do to respond to student apathy and connect with students, touch their heart, get them there. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And until we meet again, please don't forget that teachers are leaders.